I've been having these weird thoughts lately. Like, is any of this for real or not?
Hi, my name's John, and for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm working on getting my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. And so today I'm going to be taking a look at one of the most interesting and underrepresented characters in all of Kingdom Hearts, and that is Kairi. So if you like this kind of content, you want to see more of it coming from this channel, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and why even ring that notification bell so you never miss another upload. And be warned, I will be talking about spoilers from Melody of Memory, so if you don't want any of that, click off the video right now. But with all that out of the way, let's just jump into it. With the release of Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory in November, we got a fair bit more context into Kairi's childhood. And so if we're going to understand her as a character, like with anyone, this is where we need to start. Growing up, Kairi lived with her grandmother in her homeworld, Radiant Garden. And the earliest that we actually get to see her is in Birth by Sleep, when she's saved by Aqua and Mickey as she's being chased by some unversed. Now this scene in particular has three very overt story implications for Kairi's character, with this being when Aqua unintentionally performs the Keyblade inheritance ceremony when Kairi touches the Keyblade. It's when Aqua puts a spell of protection on Kairi's necklace that would send her to someone who would protect her if she's in danger again, and it illustrates her seemingly positive relationship with her grandmother, which will be important to take into consideration when considering how she is able to develop relationships with the people around her in the future. But what I really want to talk about takes place 1 year after this chance encounter with Aqua, and that's Kairi's capture at the hands of Xehanort and the ripple effects that this moment would have on the rest of her life.
I'm not sure. I think I'm forgetting something. Don't know what.
This situation in particular introduces a conversation about the effects that childhood trauma can have on an individual. The American Psychological Association defines trauma as being any disturbing experience that results in significant fear, helplessness, dissociation, confusion, or other disruptive feelings intense enough to have long-lasting negative effects on a person's attitudes, behavior, and other aspects of functioning. And the reason I bring this up is because of this new scene from Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory. I think that the framing of this scene really tells us a lot about exactly what Kairi was feeling as she was desperately trying to escape from the shadows. The shaky camera really cements to us as the viewers the sheer anxiety and fear she felt in the moment, much more profoundly than when she was being chased by the unversed in Birth by Sleep. We see that the shadows, which we typically tower over and destroy without a second thought as Sora, are just as big as she is, considering where her eye level is at. And when she is finally cornered at the castle gate, this is when a tall and imposing Xehanort comes and takes her to his lab. It's a very visceral and almost uncomfortable scene for a Kingdom Hearts game. While we're used to seeing Sora romp around destroying Heartless without fear with the likes of Donald and Goofy, seeing the world through the eyes of a child really puts into perspective just how horrifying a Heartless attack can truly be, and having it end with Xehanort looming tall over her, essentially abducting her, then having her wake up to be trapped in a pod in a dark, scary lab, and being sent to a faraway world, it's shocking. And so in this conversation about trauma, I have little doubt in my mind that this could be characterized as a potentially damaging and traumatic event within Kairi's life. And so as Xehanort sends her out to find a Keyblade wielder, she is taken to the Destiny Islands, and while it's unclear whether she appears here because she was drawn to a Keyblade wielder as Xehanort had hoped, or because Aqua's spell took her to someone with a strong light who would protect her, the fact of the matter is that when she washed up on the shore of the Destiny Islands and she was taken to the mayor's house, she no longer possessed any memory of her homeworld or her life before this. And so when we're talking about psychology, Kingdom Hearts makes this no easy feat because it's hard to tell whether her amnesia was repressed by the darkness or the actual events that transpired, or both. Regardless of the cause though, the way her amnesia presents itself appears most similarly to what was known as dissociative amnesia, which according to the DSM-5 is characterized as the inability to recall important autobiographical information, usually of a traumatic or stressful nature, that is inconsistent with ordinary forgetting, essentially meaning that this amnesia was likely caused by the trauma of something like, I don't know, being attacked by a small beady-eyed demon and being abducted by an imposing man in a lab coat, as opposed to being caused by more physiological trauma to one's brain or the onset of disease. And on top of all of this, it's important to note that this is not necessarily a permanent form of amnesia and therefore has the potential to be reversed, as we see in the case of Kairi. But before we dive in too far, even though we don't see much of Kairi before her heart is trapped inside of Sora in the first Kingdom Hearts game, from what I can tell, it doesn't seem as though her memory, while definitely being a point of sadness for her, is the cause of clinically significant distress or impairment in her day-to-day functioning, which is why I'm saying that her memory most closely resembles what the DSM-5 would describe as dissociative amnesia, but it does not meet the full criteria, at least from what we are able to see in the games before the events actually kick off. But I think it's still important to explore this because it genuinely gives us a lot of interesting insight into who she is as a character and how she experiences her memory loss and her regaining of her memories. In the original Kingdom Hearts, we initially learn about her amnesia when she's talking to Sora on the beach, and he asks her whether she remembers anything about her past, and she sadly replies,
Told you before, I don't remember. Nothing at all? Nothing.
It's likely that when she washed up on the shore of Destiny Islands, she only remembered her name and forgot all about the heartless, radiant garden Xehanort, and even her grandmother, who it seems like she had a pretty secure and loving relationship with. Now, memory loss from dissociative amnesia, which, like I'd mentioned earlier, is what Kairi's amnesia most closely mimics, can be categorized as being localized amnesia, meaning that amnesia is only attributed to a failure to recall events during a very specific period of time, or generalized amnesia, in which individuals may forget personal identity, some previous knowledge of the world, and may not be able to access well-learned skills any longer. And so considering how Kairi's amnesia actually presents itself, with her only seeming to be able to remember her own name, it appears that her amnesia is most likely generalized in nature and doesn't begin returning until 10 years later. And I think we all know what happens here. Kairi's heart gets stuck inside of Sora. Sora's looking all over the Disney worlds for his friends, but when Sora and crew return to Traverse Town to have their gummy ship repaired by Sid so that they can eventually reach Hollow Bastion, Kairi shows Sora a memory of herself in the Radiant Garden Castle library, with her grandmother telling her the story of light and darkness. But how does she regain access to this memory while her heart was still inside Sora if it's been so deeply repressed by all of the things that she has experienced in her past? Well, to answer this question, I think that we need to backtrack to Tarzan's world. In the deep jungle, Sora sees a castle that looks remarkably similar to what Hollow Bastion was supposed to look like before it was twisted into Maleficent's base of operations. And for some reason, this looks familiar to Sora even though he's never been there. This is because it wasn't actually familiar to him, but instead to Kairi. Because Kairi is dealing with this form of amnesia that closely mimics dissociative amnesia, this provides the potential to have these memories jogged to some capacity by associated stimuli. And so I actually think that Kairi's memories of her home and her grandmother back in Hollow Bastion, or Radiant Garden if you will, began returning to her in this moment when she saw the illustration of Ansem the Wise's castle. Because these memories have technically been successfully stored in Kairi's memory, this may have been the prompt that she needed to relocate them, and in turn she shows them to Sora, probably to give Sora the motivation to persevere when he's having trouble believing in himself. It's fascinating just how much of an impact Kairi has on the events of the story, even though in reality she doesn't have that much screen time in this first game.
We made it this far by sticking together. You can't go alone.
So from this point forward, we don't really explore all too much about Kairi's past and her amnesia again until Melody of Memory, in favor of illustrating more of who she is as a character through her relationships and her interactions with the people around her. And I'm not going to pretend like she is the most well fleshed out character in the franchise, but with that being said, I do think that the manner in which she carries herself every time we see her can teach us a lot about how she is able to develop attachments with the people around her, and how these relationships are able to help give us clues regarding her resilience. In my video talking about Haru Okumura from Persona 5, we discussed how psychologists will define resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stressors. But with all of this in mind, I really want to hammer home that if someone is resilient, that in no way means that the tough times in their lives won't be incredibly difficult and potentially distressing. If we're being honest, it's likely that the more resilient someone is, like Kairi and Haru, they will have endured much more difficult life circumstances than the average person, and in turn, they have grown to be more resilient for it, because resiliency is something that you can develop, and it is a skill. It's not necessarily inherent to someone, although some people may be more predisposed to it than others. In an article written by Dr. David Palmitter and company that was published on the APA's website, they discussed the 4 key components to being able to cope with difficult or traumatic situations, with those being connection, wellness, healthy thinking, and meaning making. And so I want to look at how the story is able to illustrate how Kairi was able to establish supports in almost every single one of these areas, and in turn, bolstering her resilience even in the face of many trying circumstances throughout the series. So let's start with by far the most apparent factor that illustrates Kairi's ability to cope with the numerous tragedies that she's had to endure, and that's the connections that she's able to develop with the people around her. Kingdom Hearts is a game that really stresses the importance of the power of relationships with the people who are important to you, and I think that Kairi is hugely representative of this theme throughout the story, and in turn, I believe that this is a large part as to why she is able to take so many of the awful things that happen to her so well in stride. As Palmitter puts it, you should try to connect with people who are empathetic and understanding, so that you can have a positive support system that is able to remind you that you are not alone when things get tough. Growing up on the island, it's clear that whether it be Sora and Riku or even Selphie, Kairi is able to develop strong and secure relationships with the people around her, with this probably being due to her predisposition for these secure attachments because she was so securely attached to her grandmother when she was younger. It may kind of sound cheesy, but when Sora says things like,
I don't need a weapon. My friends are my power.
Talking about resiliency factors, this couldn't be more accurate of a statement. Kingdom Hearts is a game that takes this idea of resiliency due to one's bonds with the people around them and ramps it up to a near mystical degree. It's pretty clear that her closest bond within the games is that with Sora, with her Keyblade even being highly symbolic of this relationship. Phoenix Downer on Tumblr points out that the hilt of her Keyblade is actually a black and gold king chess piece, likely meant to represent Sora, with her actual keychain being a Palpu fruit connected to the king by the red string of fate, which is meant to connect two people who are destined to be together in a similar way that sharing a Palpu fruit would. All of this to say that it's pretty clear, and they really hammer it home, that her relationship with Sora is one that transcends normal relationships. But her ability to form bonds and develop a support system with the people around her is by no means limited to this relationship with Sora. Whether she is hitting it off immediately with Hainer, Pence, and Olette in Twilight Town and Kingdom Hearts 2, or developing a friendship with Lee as they train to be Keyblade Masters together, it makes a lot of sense that with so many supportive relationships throughout the course of her life, that she would have the ability to continue to develop these secure attachments with the people she encounters, just like she was able to with her grandmother while she was young. And in turn, these relationships would help her to be able to endure the hardships she faces so often throughout the course of her life, and she never has to deal with them alone for too long. And I think that the moment that defines this point most explicitly is when she delves into her own memories within Melody of Memory in the hope of uncovering some clue regarding where Sora may have ended up after the events of Kingdom Hearts 3 when he saved her. When Kairi reaches the last world within her memories, she's greeted by a recollection of Xehanort, who jars her memories of being abducted and sent to the islands in the first place, finally uncovering the last bits, from what we can tell so far, of her memories that were still lying repressed. I think that this moment, above all else, shows just how important Kairi's relationship with Sora in particular is in helping her to protect and maintain her resilience, because while she herself is able to put up a pretty solid fight against Xehanort in this memory world, she is not able to defeat him until what appears to be her memories of Sora manifest and help her to defeat him once and for all. But the question is, are her relationships with the people around her, whether that be Sora, Naminé, Riku, or anyone else, really all that bolster her resilience throughout the course of the series?
That's right. No more waiting for you to come back from your adventures.
Now, if I were to say that Kairi's relationships with all of these different characters were the only thing that defines her as a character, this would be an incredible understatement and just not true. In reality, these supports really just illustrate well the extrinsic stimuli that feed into her natural resilience and the resilience that she's built up over the course of her life. But what about the more intrinsic stimuli that feed into this resilience? What about Kairi and her internal world help her to continue pushing forward even though these incredibly difficult moments are occurring in her life? Well, to discover this, I actually want to look at a defining trait of Kairi that deeply ties in with this idea of resilience that I don't think gets enough attention, and that is her ability to find purpose in whatever she does. The original Kingdom Hearts displays amazingly just how willing she is to help in any way that she can with Sora's battle against the Heartless when they return to Traverse Town after she's rescued. But when Sora inevitably refuses her request to join him as he returns to Hollow Bastion, she makes him take her lucky charm with him. Kairi is the one who helps Sora to realize who Riku is when maybe he wouldn't have initially in Kingdom Hearts 2. And Kairi is the one who saves Sora from the darkness in Kingdom Hearts 3. And this intrinsic motivation, or this motivation that comes from within to help the people around her, does a lot to bolster her ability to be resilient. As Paul Mitter explains, that helping others can help an individual to develop a sense of purpose, self-worth, and could just be empowering in general. Kairi's growth as a character, while subtle, is definite. Kairi begins the franchise as a princess of heart, with the memories of the horrors surrounding her past deeply repressed when she reaches the Destiny Islands. And when Sora asks her to stay back while he goes to fight the Heartless, she begrudgingly agrees. But as she grows stronger, as she grows more resilient over time, and she's able to cope with more and more awful circumstances that keep happening in her life, whether it be having her heart separated from her body due to the darkness attacking the island, being kidnapped by the organization and used as bait for Sora, or being struck down by Xehanort, she is not only able to keep her positive and optimistic outlook, but after each circumstance, she takes the initiative to grow stronger so that she will no longer be a damsel in distress, and so that she can be the asset that she's meant to be. This is her most defining character trait in my opinion, and the one that I think that we should focus on, and I hope they focus on more moving into the future of the franchise. Even after everything that we have talked about before, she always uses her struggles to continue to grow and develop. After the events of Dream Drop Distance, Kairi joins Lee to train with Merlin, to grow stronger and learn how to truly wield the Keyblade, so that she can be of genuine aid in the final battle between the 7 Lights and 13 Darknesses. But after Sora disappears after saving her, and she is able to discover how to reach him from the information she retrieves from her memories and the Nameless Star, she wants nothing more than to go with Riku. But when he inevitably refuses because she is not trained to go into this new world, she's able to maintain a healthy and optimistic standpoint, realizing that she must not only relay the message of Riku entering the land of fiction to the others, also that she needs more training before she can truly be an asset to the light in the future. She has grown into a character that I have no doubt will be a strong Keyblade master in the future as she trains under Aqua, and one who never let her memory loss slow her down. No matter what Kairi will endure in the future, no matter what is thrown at her, she will persist and adapt. It's fitting that her heart is represented in the games as what appears to be a crystal cherry blossom, because no matter how many times she may fall, no matter how many times her life may seem fleeting, she will always bloom again. But that would do it for today's video, guys, and I want to pass the question off to you. What do you think of Kairi as a character, and is there anything huge that you feel like I missed? Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below, and while you're down there, why not liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and why not even ringing that notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure to share this video wherever you like sharing things if you enjoy it, because it helps the channel out so incredibly much. But as always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, and why not even a fantastic rest of your month. And I will see you in the next video. Later.